Alright, I'm a bit late to the party, but I thought I'd do a quick video on mouthwashing. I played this months ago and I've just had the footage sat on my hard drive since then. I got really busy with projects like the Metal Gear video and completely forgot about it. But I remembered how jarring and how messed up this game was, as well as how awesome it was. I love low-res horror games. There's just something unsettling about them. Whether that be puppet combo style games or other small indie games like Crow Country and Fear the Spotlight. But anyway, mouthwashing. This game was brought to the indie horror games scene by a developer called Wrong Organ, a Swedish Stockholm-based developer whose other titles include How Fish is Made, another quite bizarre but interesting and surreal video game. Mouthwashing follows 5 members of a team aboard a cargo ship in space. Disaster strikes and the ship crashes, and they are not only stranded but have to deal with internal conflicts and many other problems and tensions that can arise in such a precarious situation. I'm not going to say too much here as I don't want to spoil it, but let's just jump in. Oh, and of course there will be spoilers in this video for mouthwashing. The Tulpar cargo freighter is 147 days into its long-haul 382-day journey through the deep nothingness of space. The ship itself is operated by a shipping service named the Pony Express, hence the name Tulpar, as Tulpar, according to Turkic mythology, is a winged horse not too dissimilar to the Greek Pegasus. With someone alone in the cockpit of the ship, a warning flashes on the screen that impact is imminent. Space debris is in the flight path, and despite needing to move the ship to the left, this person moves it to the right, so the ship engages the autopilot with the crew being docked 4,000 credits for this error. This person then pushes a big red button, turning off the autopilot, and this puts the ship on alert, with an alarm ringing out indicating a crash is imminent. The person leaves the cockpit and walks down the long corridors but keeps seeing a mascot, a horse, and this horse seems to represent the Pony Express's mascot, Polly. The corridors get more and more surreal, seemingly never ending, and posters of Polly are plastered all over the walls. The person turns around and Polly is standing there. Fast forward to 2 months later, with the ship having crash landed on an unknown planet, 4 members of the crew, who are Jimmy, who we now control, Anya, who is the medical officer, Swansea, who is the mechanic, and Daisuke, who is Swansea's apprentice, are sat at the dining table in the common area and they are discussing their dwindling supplies. Jimmy is suggesting they check out the cargo in the hold, but Swansea objects. His reasoning is that the Pony Express will dock their pay. Anya says that there could be something useful in there. Daisuke says that a quick look inside won't hurt, but it'll be difficult to get inside as the cargo hold is locked down. Jimmy says that there has to be an in case of emergency way inside. Anya says that the door should have an emergency access code that can be uncovered using a special tool called a code scanner device, but that only the captain has access to it. Jimmy states that they don't need the captain, as they can find the device themselves, so he sets out to track it down. A conversation with Daisuke sees him state that they've been eating soup, and they're getting pretty tired of it. He says that they only have enough food for the next 4 months, to which Jimmy replies that 4 months is more than their remaining air supply, indicating that they have a much bigger problem. Despite their predicament, Daisuke seems positive about their situation, talking about what he'll do when he gets back to Earth. Anyway, it seems that foam has blocked off access to large parts of the ship, so only limited areas are available. This foam is an automatic and emergency defense mechanism activated by the ship's systems, which protect the safety of the crew by restoring the integrity of the hull. You may have noticed that the captain was not there at the table. Well, that's because the captain, Curly, was really badly injured in the crash. Speaking with Anya, she says that Curly won't stay still. Jimmy asks about painkillers, and Anya replies that she can't stand the noises Curly makes when she tries to give them to him. Anya says the code scanner might be in the cockpit, which apparently has been blocked off by foam. Jimmy says that he'll take a look, and he then gives Curly the painkillers whilst Anya runs out of the room. By the looks of Curly, it certainly looks like he may have been the one who crashed the ship. But why? Getting inside the cockpit, which is absolutely covered in foam due to the crash, Jimmy grabs the code scanner and heads to the cargo bay. Uncovering the code and unlocking the door to the cargo hold, the crew discover that the cargo consists of mouthwash, a brand called Dragon Breath mouthwash, and there's lots of the stuff. crew discover that there is no extra food they can eat to survive. Jimmy is perplexed that a crew of 5 are hauling tons of mouthwash across space for a year. Anya mentions the product's high sugar content, and Swansea mentions that it's 14% ethanol content. He's implying that they should drink the stuff, which the other members of the crew object to, of course, but Swansea chugs the stuff anyway, bringing an end to 15 years of sobriety and having a toast to Captain Curly. Jimmy is in opposition to drinking it, and Anya seems to be having a crisis. 1 month later, so 3 months after the crash, Jimmy wakes up to hear groaning. He goes to check on Curly and thinks that maybe he's in pain and that he needs his medication, so goes to find Anya to see if he's already been given some. Judging from the many bottles of mouthwash around the ship and the boxes in the cargo hold lying open, it seems that the crew have been drinking a lot of it. Entering the cockpit, he finds Anya and Swansea in there talking. Jimmy asks Anya why she is crying and she responds that she's fine. He says that they all need to keep it together. Swansea mockingly refers to Jimmy as Captain. This indicates some animosity due to Swansea being a longer serving employee than Jimmy, who simply brushes this off and says that Curly is making noises. Anya states that she forgot to give him his meds, so Jimmy heads back to the medical room to give Curly the painkillers. There aren't many left, and Jimmy wonders what they'll do to keep Curly quiet after all the meds are gone. Curly is in agony, but Jimmy is taking the time to prioritise talking about his inner turmoil about how everyone thinks of him and how they look at him. He considers what would she do and cusses himself out, seemingly frustrated at something he may have done. Could he be referring to Anya? Is this the reason she was crying? He harbours some serious animosity towards Curly and even starts hitting him after giving him the meds, leading to Curly crying. Another month has passed, so it's now 4 months after the crash. Daisuke lies in the corridor, passed out drunk as a result of drinking mouthwash. He comes to and gets up, stating that his mother found the internship with Pony Express for him, and hopes his mother doesn't blame herself for what's happened. After, Jimmy speaks with Anya, and she is weighing up whether or not to drink the mouthwash. She then says that not all the medicine on board was in her office, and that some is also stored in a storage locker in the hallway. Problem is that it's blocked by the foam. She considers that they may be able to break the foam apart and get to the medicine. Obtaining the axe from Swansea, who is crunk on mouthwash and angrily breaks the large window screen with the axe, Jimmy breaks the foam apart and gets the medication. Anya is happy about this, but asks if he can administer Curly's painkillers again. Jimmy shouts at Anya, saying that he's trying to fix things on the ship and that he's having to do everything. He talks about taking responsibility as the new captain. He then goes to give Curly the meds. This time, Jimmy's conversation is different, as he now says he understands the pressure that Curly was under before, and that he, Curly, had tried to tell him about it. He gives the meds and Curly cries again. Another month passes, 5 months since the crash now, and Daisuke cries for Jimmy's help, as he says that Anya has locked herself in the medical bay. Jimmy is more concerned about all the medication being in there. Trying to speak with her through the door, Jimmy asks her questions, but she's not answering him. All she says is that she'll take care of it. Jimmy remembers a broken vent inside the utility room that they could use to get into the medical room. Going down there, Jimmy speaks with Swansea, who is still drunk and looking a bit worse for wear. He's still denying them access to the vent, so they need to create a cocktail that will knock Swansea out. Going to the kitchen, Jimmy finds the recipe, makes it, and substitutes the water and tonic for the mouthwash and isopropyl, which is very dangerous, and they give it to Swansea. After he drunkenly mugs poor Daisuke off, telling him he's a terrible intern, Swansea necks the drink and he passes out. Taking the key, they enter the utility room, which is full of foam, which has itself rendered most of the cryopods unusable. Seems that Swansea had given Daisuke the idea that the room was completely full of foam and kept the door locked, with only himself having access. This is why. He was removing foam from one of the cryopods. He was waiting for everyone to die so that he could save himself. Anyway, needing to get to Anya, Daisuke stares at the vent. He talks about how Swansea said the vent wasn't safe, but Jimmy convinces him to enter it, saying that the people are counting on him. Eventually, Daisuke lets out a scream, and he asks Anya what she's done. Right, let's pause there. We need to go over some other stuff. So throughout the game's events, it actually breaks away from the present day to look at the events that went on before the crash occurred. I wanted to cover these in their own section as they shed light and help paint a picture of what was going on with the crew members prior to the disaster instead of jumping back and forth all the time. Let's rewind to a whole week before the crash. Right, 7 days before the crash, Curly is sitting with Anya in the medical bay. He says that he couldn't sleep. She says that she still has Jimmy's evaluation to do. But Jimmy keeps saying weird things on his report, such as that he's sexually attracted to horses, so that's interesting. Curly then says that he'll do Jimmy's report for her, as he's known him for a long time and pulled some strings to get him a job as a co-pilot. She also hands Curly a note written by Swansea stating that they, the Pony Express, can't expect him to perform miracles. Going downstairs to speak with Swansea, it appears that Daisuke has gotten himself stuck in some foam. It seems that this foam system has a tendency to malfunction on account of how old the ship is. Curly then carefully frees Daisuke using an axe. They look at the vent and Swansea speaks of the hazards in the vent, as it's collapsed inside itself and Daisuke could get killed or seriously injured if he goes up there. Curly tells Swansea this malfunction cannot happen again, as the foam may damage the cryopods. Curly then heads to the cockpits and carries out Jimmy's evaluation. Afterwards, Jimmy talks about how he likes being co-pilot because he likes to feel in control. Curly brings up that Jimmy was in some trouble back on Earth. Curly then wonders if being a pilot for Pony Express is all that he'll ever achieve. A message then comes in from corporate. The following day, it seems the message from corporate says that this will be their last haul, as they are all losing their jobs. Curly goes to share the news with the crew, but they throw a surprise party for him, and he holds off on the news for now. After Curly has made the cake for the party, the crew sit down at the table, and Curly shares the news, putting a massive downer on the party atmosphere. Pony Express is switching to automated freighters, and the Tulpar was the only manned ship left in the fleet. Curly says that he was instructed to wait until they were closer to their destination before he shared the news. Jimmy accuses Curly of getting what he wanted without the guilt, referring to their chat the day before about wanting to achieve more. Jimmy continues to guilt trip Curly. Jimmy then starts to make everyone else at the table feel like crap too. It seems like he's trying to make the crew hate Curly. Curly then cuts the cake. 2 days before the crash, Curly is sat with Anya in the lounge. She can't sleep and she says that she often looks at the midnight window screen and she keeps noticing one dead pixel in the corner and that she now can't ignore it. Curly says that they have 237 days left until they reach their destination. Anya then asks why the Pony Express put a lock on the medical room door, but not the sleeping quarters. The word safety flashes in Curly's mind for a second. The day before the crash, Curly is in the medical room. He's looking for a gun and heads to the cockpit. He finds Anya there on her knees and crying. Curly mentions that Anya is the nurse, so she never did a psych evaluation, indicating that he realizes his error and should have known to do one for her. He thinks that she is upset about the crew being let go, but the real reason she is upset is so much worse. She explains that she hid the safety case containing the gun. She then says that she's pregnant. It's Jimmy's baby, and she was sexually assaulted by him. She wanted the gun to protect herself. That way Jimmy couldn't hurt her with it, or anyone else for that matter, so she hid it and only she knows where it is. Seems that Jimmy is quite dangerous. In the cockpit, a printout on the side mentions abnormal asteroid trajectories along their route. On the day of the crash, Curly approaches Anya. She says that she told him she is pregnant with his child. Jimmy didn't say anything helpful to her, and Anya says that he just walked off. She says that she does not want Jimmy in there anymore. Curly says that he needs to find Jimmy and that everything will be okay. Speaking with him, Curly says that he can fix this and they can figure all of this out. Jimmy once again lays it on thick about how everyone thinks Curly is such a good leader. Jimmy says that everything will be different for them now and that nothing they have done will matter. Jimmy blames Curly for not having everything under control, essentially putting the blame on Curly for him getting Anya pregnant after he sexually assaulted her. Jimmy then starts to talk about how Curly should crash the ship, killing the entire crew, and the whole thing would be viewed as a tragedy. Jimmy then comforts Curly. Jimmy then walks off saying he'll take care of it and heads to the cockpit. Curly doesn't appear to do anything to stop Jimmy at first, but then Curly tries to run to the cockpit after the crash and confronts Jimmy, who seems slightly disturbed by what it is that he's just done. Curly heads into the cockpit to try and save the ship from crashing, but it's too late and he ends up being badly injured. And it may now come as no surprise that Jimmy crashed the ship. I know, shock horror, right? Let's get back to the present day. Anyway, after Daisuke is pulled from the vents, he is grievously injured, which of course is exactly what Swansea was warning about days earlier. Swansea suggests they use some mouthwash as disinfectant, which is in the cargo hold. Jimmy goes downstairs and bizarrely he sees a gravestone in front of the cargo hold, but when he shines the code scanning device on it, the gravestone disappears and the cargo hold now looks very different. It's a lot bigger, and a note sits atop a box which states that the beast is blind and is aimless and restless. The beast is a very evil version of Polly, the mascot for the Pony Express. Is Jimmy hallucinating, or is this real? Despite being pursued, Jimmy silently makes his way across the platform and obtains some mouthwash. Going back to Daisuke's side, he says that he messed up. A couple of hours later, unfortunately, the bleeding won't stop. Swansea speaks with Daisuke and he's holding the axe. He tells the young man to calm down and seems genuinely sad about the state Daisuke is in. Swansea then mercy kills him. After this shocking scene, Jimmy shouts that he could have saved him. This irks Swansea and he says it's all over. Jimmy decides now is the right time to confront Swansea about his plan to use the cryopod to save himself. He responds that he did talk to Anya, implying that she told him all about what Jimmy did to her, that she was pregnant. He says that the captain should go down with his ship. He tells Jimmy to go ahead and get inside the pod, sarcastically telling him that he's earned it. Jimmy decides that Swansea, who has taken the axe, is now a threat to him, so he needs to find the gun. Entering the medical room, he finds Anya inside and she appears to have ended herself using the last of the painkillers to take an overdose. The gun she hid was hidden underneath the gurney on which Curly is lay. Taking the gun, Curly starts to laugh. Opening the door, Swansea is in there and screams at Jimmy, running at him with the axe. Jimmy has run to the cockpit, and Swansea is now violently banging on the door. He's furious with Jimmy and it seems he wants to kill him, or at least harm him for what happened to Daisuke. Jimmy ties the door shut and grabs a metal pipe just as Swansea smashes the window and tries to unlock the door. What follows is a trippy as hell journey through vents with the words "take responsibility" showing up, with Jimmy seemingly falling through long corridors until he gets to a graveyard. Possibly a representation of all the damage he'd caused by crashing the ship. He's being hunted by Swansea and has to shoot him. After Swansea is downed, the world has flipped back to normal again and Swansea is sat on a chair talking about his life. He says that he spent 13 years as a drunk until he saw a streetlight shining in his face. He likens it to the power of God, showing him a vision of him dead from the drink, basically. It scared him enough to sober up, so he bought a house, got a job and vowed to be a good father. He talks about the endless desperation in getting things done. The feeling he thought he'd get when getting those things done never lived up to his expectations. He says that he's ready to face the music and Jimmy says that he's going to fix everything. He still seems to think that this is all somehow fixable. Jimmy then shoots him, killing him. All that is left of the crew is Jimmy and whatever is left of Curly. A little later, Jimmy carries Curly to the table and at the table sit all of his crewmates dead. Jimmy lays Curly on the table like some sort of platter and the dead guests celebrate. Jimmy is tripping, hallucinating, big time. Swansea drinks a toast to Captain Jimbo. Anya demands a speech, but Jimmy stands up and cuts off part of Curly's leg. Grim. Again, Jimmy starts to guilt trip Curly due to the fact that they were all set to lose their jobs. He mentions how he is higher up the ladder than they'll ever be. Jimmy tells Curly that the crew forgive him and that they're going to make it through this. A bit later, Jimmy makes his way through another seemingly endless corridor and eyes start to pop up everywhere, almost symbolizing that Jimmy is being watched by Curly. After those weird hallucinations, Jimmy ends up in a large open area and he sees Curly strapped to a contraption and he has many valves stuck into him. Watching the nearby TV set, it shows an instruction to take Curly's leg and to feast. Placing the piece of Curly's leg into his mouth, turning various valves, shows it flowing through Curly and afterwards Jimmy sees the words "help me" written on the screen and then sees an image of himself walking through space towards a now on fire Curly who tells Jimmy that he wants to go home. Jimmy replies that they are home. Curly then states that he shouldn't worry if anyone finds them, as Curly will carry on playing the villain, that Jimmy will be the better man in the end, just like Jimmy always wanted. Curly says that he's taking responsibility. Jimmy falls to his knees saying that they can both be heroes, that they are a team, just like they used to be. Jimmy apologizes to Curly for making a mistake. The trippiness does not end there. Oh no. Jimmy, now back in the vents again, comes across a sort of womb. Scanning it reveals an animal inside. A horse. I know Anya was pregnant after he assaulted her, but why an animal? Well, this goes back to Jimmy saying that he was sexually attracted to cartoon horses on his psych evaluation. Real or a joke? You decide. An alarm then blares out and the place begins to shake. A really long and giant horse then emerges from the womb. Jimmy must move through the vent and avoid this long horse, obviously another representation of the polyhorse mascot. He does eventually make it out of the vent, and after walking through a corridor of ID cards which show members of his crew, Jimmy spots a mountain of empty bottles of mouthwash, and he then approaches the mascot. It speaks to him, calling him boss. Jimmy tells it that Pony Express is dead, as is the mascot. It mocks him, calling him caged and misunderstood. Jimmy says that Curly tried his best, as did he, but he's the better man, that they can both still make it, that he can take care of him and that he will take responsibility. Jimmy says that he messed up, but that he can make it right. Polly says that if that's true, why is Jimmy so concerned about Curly? Jimmy then snaps back to reality, and he's still sat at the table, Curly just lying there, looking at him. He carries Curly down to the utility room into the cryopods. Jimmy places Curly inside and tells him that he's going to be okay, that now he'll survive. Jimmy says that he's proud of having been his friend and co-pilot. Jimmy then walks off and a single gunshot is heard, indicating that he ended himself. Curly is then cryogenically frozen and will have another 20 years of life in cryostasis, with the only hope being that someone finds their ship. The game then ends. Alright, so like I said, a pretty surreal game. There's quite a basic plot, with a lot of the game's so-called confusing bits actually being hallucinations and surreal moments of foreshadowing. The mouthwash itself was clearly contributing to something, but it was kind of left as a mystery as to what that was. The company on the mouthwash advert even say that they take zero responsibility for harm caused by their product. For mouthwash. It would have been good to know a bit more about the mouthwash, but I guess it was maybe used more as symbolism in terms of not taking responsibility for something. But there's something else we need to look at to finish, and that is to discuss who exactly was the main antagonist of this story, as upon research, a lot of the community for this game seem to disagree on who that actually is. Looking at this game and the general feeling around it, it seems there was a big discussion around who the real antagonist was. Curly or Jimmy. Most people say it was Jimmy, since he assaulted Anya and was generally a pretty awful person. He was someone that did not like taking accountability for his actions. Jimmy didn't do this to Anya because he wanted her, he did it because he wanted power. He even at one point, speaking to Curly, says that he likes being in control. Jimmy was a narcissist in the purest form, really. He would constantly put Curly down, often in front of others, would privately tell him about how he's his friend and give him affirmation. One instance was at the table in the lounge when Curly shared the news of the crew all losing their jobs, and Jimmy decided that, as his co-pilot, and best friend I might add, this was the perfect time to go in on him in front of everybody. He'd constantly bring up his opinion that Curly thought he was better than them all. Then Jimmy went on to attack the whole crew personally about them all failing in life. Then there's the other thing, crashing the ship into an asteroid because he didn't want to take responsibility for his actions. Jimmy's disregard for other people is also seen through Daisuke going into the vent, as Curly and Swansea and Daisuke are discussing it before the crash, and discussing how dangerous it is inside the vents since it collapsed in on itself. Jimmy is actually outside the door listening. He knew. The latter part of the game then became about Jimmy taking responsibility for his actions as captain. At first he didn't, because it was always someone else's fault, namely Curly's, but eventually Jimmy was so driven to take responsibility that it drove him even further into insanity, to the point that he became completely deluded and that he thought he could still put things right, by saving Curly, who, let's be honest, was pretty far gone at that point. To clarify, I think that they were both antagonists in this story in their own way. Jimmy because he was obviously not a very good person, like at all, and Curly because he did nothing about Jimmy's obviously damaging, dangerous and destructive behaviour, likely because his opinion was clouded due to them being good friends, and perhaps because of his guilt over the fact that he was the one that got Jimmy a job. A job that he got Jimmy because Jimmy had some problems back on Earth, likely with the law. But let me know what you think below. But as for the trippy sections, well, it's pretty clear that Jimmy, whilst being a total psychopath before the crash, had been descending into further madness after it. A lot of the things he saw through these hallucinations were representations of his inner turmoil, I guess. Curly had hallucinations too, on the way to the cockpit for Jimmy's evaluation, but these could have just been after the crash. There were the alert messages indicating an imminent crash, which is obviously foreshadowing. There were also the bent ladders indicating that him on the corporate ladder, so to speak, was done now as the company was firing them all and he had nothing left. Maybe, I don't know, all open to interpretation, I guess. But that is it for this video covering the story of Mouthwashing. Overall, a pretty cool, short indie horror game. The atmosphere in this game was pretty good and had some creepy moments for sure. I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for other games this studio produces in the future. If you enjoyed this one, then please be sure to leave a like. It takes about a second and it helps the channel more than you know. Subscribe and of course leave a comment, as I'm sure there are plenty of discussion points around this game. But for now, take care and I will see you in the next one.